Welcome to the Alain Guillot podcast, a podcast about life, leadership, and money matters. Our guest today is Larry Kotlikoff. Larry is a professor of economics at Boston University, president of Economic Security Planning, and a New York Times best-selling author. He writes about personal finance, generational policy, climate policy, inequality, tax reform, social security, banking, robotization, and much more. And today we will speak about his book, Money Magic, an economist's secret to money, to more money, less risk, and a better life. Larry, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great pleasure, Alon. Thanks for having me.
So, Larry, everyone wants to make the most out of their money. They like to create magic. They like to know that secret formula that from a little effort, they can magnify their money. And your book tells us just that. But before we get to the topic of your book, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your background. How is it that you got into economics, for example?
Well, as I relayed in the book, I first wanted to become a doctor, and I took biology 101 at the same time I was taking economics 101, and they forced me to dissect a frog, which involved cutting open the frog, anesthetizing it, it was asleep, killing it with some drops of I think it was acetylcholine, and then rubbing its heart back to life, and then killing it again, rubbing its heart, doing this like 20 times, recording it each time. By the end of that first class in biology lab, I was an economist. I decided that you can do practical good things for countries, for cities, for individuals in economics, because there's so many questions in economics can solve, including personal financial questions. So that's why I wrote the book Money Magic. It's partly because we have all this knowledge that we've accumulated in economics after 100 years of working in the field of finance, starting with work by Irving Fisher, a very famous economist at Yale University in the 1920s. And there's been all these Nobel Prizes in economics, in finance, awarded for work in finance. And then you have, in my case, I've developed a software company starting 30 years ago that does the economics-based financial planning. And not everybody wants to run software. So at this point, I wanted to say, look, we have conventional financial advice out there. It's based on a methodology that economists think is really bad and dangerous. It's a completely orthogonal at right angles to what we recommend. We have this terrific software that I've learned lessons from, and we have this body of theory. I can combine these two things, present it in a book, not ask anybody to run any software because most people don't want to run software, and just convey, having run enough cases, what people should do to make magic, seemingly magic. If I can tell you how to raise your living standards safely by maybe a factor of 50%, you might think, well, I'm selling some snake oil, right? Well, in the US, if you're 62 and you're taking Social Security, as a lot of people do when they retire at 62, if you were patient and wait till 70, you'll get a 76% higher number adjusted for inflation. If you downsize your house in half because the kids have left, you'll have a ton more money right there. Save on property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and just the fact that you have 50% less trapped equity in your home. If you move to a state where there's no income tax, if you maybe you'll decide to retire, I can convince you in the book to retire 3 years or 5 years later rather than retiring at 62. That can make an enormous difference to your health insurance costs, to your to how much you need to save and how much you can spend starting from 62 on, not waiting till retirement, but starting right now, because you don't have to save as much for a longer retirement. Then there's things like annuities, then there's choice.
Fuck. I don't know what it is. I don't know. Okay, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know what it is. Okay, so let
we froze there for a second, but I don't think we're so bad.
Okay, no problem. So I have a problem with the profession of economics, which is if I get two mathematicians and ask them how much is 2 by 2, how much is 2 plus 2, all of them will agree is 4, unless one of them is smoking something different. But if I ask two economists, what's the rate of inflation for next year, which is something that, I mean, everyone is concerned about, no one will agree. So I find the profession of economics, although I love it, frustrating. And I haven't been able to predict when is the next stock market crash either, no matter how many economics books do I read. So I wonder if you could enlighten us and tell us what is it that I'm missing.
Well, economics doesn't have all of the answers. There's lots of uncertainty. So what you want to be doing is thinking about, and that's what I try and present in the book, different scenarios. If there's high inflation, if there's low inflation, for example, we're now facing a 7, potentially 9% inflation over the next few months on an annual basis. And if you have cash in the bank, which a lot of people do, if you're on a fixed income, you're really getting hit. You're facing a big inflation tax that's called seigniorage. Going back to the Middle Ages, the seignior would print coins and sell the coins to the town and take in chickens. And the people would be left with inflation because there'd be more coins circulating and they'd have fewer chickens. So you can see the problem. It's a real tax. So what we want to do is think about high and low and middle inflation. With the case of inflation, there's a natural way to try and hedge your risk there, which is to have a mortgage that's larger, because now you have a nominal liability. So if inflation takes off, it waters down how much you have to pay back in real terms, like in terms of hot dogs. If I have to pay $3,000 a month in a mortgage bill and the price of a hot dog is $500 a hot dog, it's a whole lot different in terms of the numbers of hot dogs than if I have to pay, if the price of the hot dog is $5 per hot dog. So inflation waters down the repayment, just like it waters down my fixed income. If I'm on a fixed pension, which is not adjusting for inflation, or if I have a bond that's going to pay off a principal plus interest that's not inflation adjusted, I'm going to get killed by inflation. So you have to have some hedges here that you have to deal with the risk. So a lot of the book is about dealing with risk. It's dealing with finding safe ways to raise your living standard, like being patient with Social Security. I explained a few things, but then there's also this idea of getting a better life, having a better life. Now, where is that coming from? Well, we're buying all kinds of things when we make lifestyle decisions, like we're buying extra leisure if we retire early. If we get divorced, we're buying freedom from a spouse we hate, maybe, okay? If we marry somebody we love, we're going to have these economies of shared living, one washing machine, one electric bill, one house to maintain. So but we may not like that person all that much, but maybe they come with a big, big increase in the living standard. So we need to be able to evaluate the living standard price of these lifestyle decisions. We need to shop for our living standard, knowing what things cost in terms of our living standard. So I give an analogy of going to a supermarket. Suppose you went to a supermarket, you had a cart, and you couldn't see any prices. There were no prices marked for any of the products. And the way it works is you put in stuff into the cart. As soon as it reaches $200, your credit card is immediately billed, and that's it. You have to leave the supermarket with $200 worth of groceries, but it's not $200 worth of value because you bought things that you don't value at their current price. You value them less. And then there are other things that you think that you value more than the price they're being charged. So you don't get as much, you don't get $200 worth of happiness. You get $200 worth of groceries. We're getting a certain amount of lifestyle happiness, but we're not really getting as much lifestyle happiness as if we knew what things really cost. So part of what the book is doing is giving enough examples without it being tedious, to make people see what things cost and what does it mean to retire a couple of years earlier in terms of my permanent living standard if I'm this age or this age, and how can I actually make that calculation with on the back of an envelope with a pencil and get pretty close to the right answer. So, but the book's fun. It's not. We've got some great blurbs. Each one of the blurbs. We've got two blurbs from New York Times Nobel Prize winners in economics. Jane Bryan Quinn, who's been the dean of personal finance, wrote for years in the Washington Post. John Walden has like a 1 million-person newsletter, and Scott Burns, who's written for the Dallas News about personal finance for decades. They all say it's a fun read, and that's what I tried to make it. I try to make it, funny. I'm not, economists are not supposed to be funny, and if you think about, you were concerned about economists and having more than one differing in opinions, but there's also the question of even one economist not even agreeing with themselves. Harry Truman, the president, used to say, I want a one-handed economist because I don't want somebody saying on the one hand and on the other hand. So a lot of answers in economics are two-handed answers, but then there's some other things that are one-handed answers. And the biggest thing I would say is that the economics approach to financial planning is completely different than the conventional approach. The methodology is completely different. They don't teach what we teach. We won't teach what they teach. We think what they're doing is trying to sell products, is a bait and switch to sell products. And the industry, the big companies have developed a methodology that they force the financial planners, who themselves are good people and are trying their best, but they're forced to use crappy tools. And I have this tool I developed that I'm discussing the results of in the book. I'm not trying to get people to buy the tool. It's not like a big, come on for the tool. It's, but we have a totally different approach, and we think our approach is actually scientific. We think we're the doctors, and these other guys are the quacks. Not the planners themselves, but the Fidelity Investments, the TI, the big companies that are forcing their planners to use tools that have no connection to any of the Nobel Prize winning work that's been awarded, probably 11 prizes in finance. None of that's taught to these guys who have CFPs or CPAs or RIAs or 20 different certificates in personal finance. You see the problem. So this is the first book that an economist has laid out that covers all the areas of personal finance, from career choice to getting married, to getting divorced, to how to invest your money, to dealing with taking Social Security, or in your case, it would be the CPP and the RSP, is it? RPF?
RRSP is
RRSP, yeah. And they're not that much different. So Canadians, I think, can get a huge value from the book just as much as Americans, pretty much. The examples are for using the US tax system, but you have your provincial taxes. You get a pretty good feeling for what's involved here.
Well, let's start from the moment a young man or woman trying to decide what to do with their life career-wise. We have been led to believe that if you don't go to any of these Ivy school in the United States, like Harvard, Yale, your future is bleak, and that you have no opportunity in your life, and that you have to get thousands and thousands of dollars of student debt in order to have a chance in the real world. So I wonder, what's your opinion about that?
Well, I have a chapter called Don't Borrow for College. Think about the fact is that in the US, 40% of the kids who start college and borrow for the privilege of starting college don't finish college. So imagine engaging in an investment where from the outset, you've got a 40% chance of getting absolutely nothing back, and then borrowing at a very high rate to make that investment, because you're borrowing these federal loans at a much higher rate than you can lend at. So what I'm trying to explain is that the evidence is that going to Harvard is not going to, you can take your Harvard degree, you can take your Harvard sweater, wear it all year round. Let's say work in Arizona, it's 110 degrees, wear that to work every day, your Harvard sweater. It might get you a first job, but if you're not actually up to snuff, that Harvard sweater is not going to keep you employed the rest of your life. So I talk about two guys in our graduate class in economics. I went to Harvard to get my PhD, and the two smartest guys in the class did not finish high school. They didn't finish college. They got accepted into our PhD class because they wrote they're brilliant guys. They wrote a brilliant critique of the admissions director's, admissions professor's own work. He accepted them. He was so proud of the fact, let's bring these guys in. They're going to be fantastic. We were all intimidated. They didn't have the tenacity to do their work. They wanted to go off and do things that they were interested in, not do their homework, not study for the exam, not write a thesis. So they never graduated with a PhD. So they have very good jobs, but not really what they had hoped for, and not what the admissions director wanted them to achieve. So you can go to Harvard. Harvard is collecting talented people that and people that work hard. It's not really making people work hard, and it's not making them talented. That's the thing that we need to, that's one of the big secrets in the book, that these top expensive schools are not going to make you rich. Going there per se is not going to make you rich. If you worked your butt off to get in there, you know how to work your butt off in any job. But had you not gone there and went to Wake Forest, you would still be successful because you know how to work. That's the big difference. You have what's the Germans called Sitzfleisch, seat flesh, which is, if you're an academic, you have to be willing to sit in a chair and work, 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours a day, writing papers that may not get accepted in order to be successful, and then try again and try again. That's what, and that's true in any profession. But I also talk about becoming a plumber. There's a chapter, the first chapter is called My Daughter the Plumber. I'm Jewish, and the old expression of Jewish moms was my son the doctor, because they wanted to have a son who was a doctor. And if the kid became a doctor, that was the big deal. Okay, they would brag about that. But these days, a plumber can make more than a doctor, and it can be a female, right? It can be a daughter who's the plumber. So I'm trying to get people to think broadly about careers, thinking about, going to a very cheap state or maybe community college, taking courses online for next to nothing that you can pay for a job with a job at McDonald's. Maybe you take 20 online courses for a certificate in quantum computing, and now you apply to IBM's quantum computing group or somebody's quantum computing group and then the person hiring has to think about hiring that person versus hiring the English major from Williams College, who just borrowed, $300,000 to go to Williams, he and his parents. Who's IBM going to hire? They're going to hire the guy who's got the certificates, who knows something about quantum computing, because they need somebody to actually do the work. And that's right. Here you got a professor of economics. I've been a professor for my entire life. I love academia, but I'm saying that this is not necessarily at these prices and at this borrowing cost the way to be going, okay? Because only about 30% at most of American kids actually get college degrees. So most of us aren't getting college degrees. Most of us are making a living without college degrees. The guys like Steve Jobs, they never finished. Bill Gates, they didn't finish college, right? Elon Musk. So you don't need a college degree to become a billionaire, right? Let alone a PhD, let alone go to Harvard, right?
Yes. Well, my frustration comes from we being sold that we need to pay this humongous amount of money in order to get this pleasure. And I appreciate that you are saying that in your book, because this is something that I say many times in my blog as well. And people say, no, but you need a college degree from XYZ college, because how else are you going to have credibility? And of course, it takes someone like you with a PhD in economics to tell me that I'm right.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And, having somebody say this is like, it's like sacrilege. Let alone an academic that went to Harvard. I'm, basically saying, if you're going to have to pay for Harvard, huge amounts of money, and have you and your parents borrow, and maybe you have to repay your parents because that conversation is not taking place necessarily, or your parents pay and they take it out of your hide in terms of leaving you less money or having less money that now you have to take care of them. You got to think through this whole financial decision here, and you're 18 years old. I'm trying to say to 18-year-olds, read this damn book, or your parents read the book for on behalf of your kids, and let's think through this before you start indenturing your kids. I know friends who are 65 are still paying off student loans, who have a successful career. My friend of mine who's a doctor in Lexington, terrific doctor, 65, still paying off student loans that he took out years before. Has had a successful career, but he can't get out. He can't declare, there's no way to discharge these loans. They're not like a regular loan. You can't, even if you go bankrupt, you can't discharge them. They'll take your salary, they'll confiscate your salary, they'll confiscate your Social Security check. That's what Uncle Sam is doing. That's a scam. He's running a scam. He's getting these people, and then the colleges are going to write you a letter. Here's your award. You get to borrow. You get this much in grants, and here's the amount that you get to borrow from us, or borrow from Uncle Sam, and maybe a little bit more from us, or these other sources at an even higher rate. And that's not an award. That's penury. That's a lifetime of indentured servitude to pay back the man, in this case, Uncle Sam.
Okay, I now going to the other extreme. I wonder, I don't want to abuse your time. I wonder if you still have like 5 more minutes.
Oh, yeah, as much time as you want. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So you mentioned in your book that just by delaying retirement 2 years or so, you could drastically increase your income. The thing is, I tried to retire. I tried to retire last year, and being retired is horrible. I don't know about you, but you look like you could retire if you wanted to, but I see that you're still working. And many of the people who can afford to retire that I see in the press, they don't want to retire. They are happy working. So what gives?
Well, I agree. I think, you can only play golf so much. You can only play bridge so much. The decision to retire is the decision to take the longest vacation of your life. It's you could end up being retired longer than you worked. And it's one thing if you really know what you're going to do. Maybe you're going to go take another, take courses or be able to entertain yourself. Obviously, there's lots of people physically can't keep working, and there's no option for them. But otherwise, I think retirement is like financial and possibly psychological suicide. So on the other hand, my wife retired. She was working for Wayfair in property management, and Wayfair is it's like the Amazon of furniture in the US. So they set up these call centers in Podunk U, some place in the outskirts of the, places where there's no airport, and they're asking people in the real estate department to look at those facilities and drive 8 hours to get there. So this is actually a form of age discrimination, because as people get older, their ability to sit in a car for 8 hours to drive, their eyesight is not as good, their back hurts. So this is a way to weed out. So this is one of the things I talk about. I mean, she's retired. She's happier retired than she was working for Wayfair, even though, it was the end of a long, successful career in real estate property management. But it was clear that she was the oldest person in Wayfair, and the oldest person in the high-tech company that she was working in before, I think, was Latina Health. Maybe not the oldest, but maybe the second oldest or something. And if you go to a company and you see that nobody's over 55, you got to think twice, is this the company I want to join? Because you got to maximize your lifetime earnings, not your short-term earnings. And they may have a very steep curve, and they say, well, if you make it to 60, we're going to be paying you so much because you're going to get these raises year after year. You're going to get these, we're going to give you equity. But basically, they've got it set up to have you drop out. And, corporate America is not necessarily your friend. Your boss is not your friend. Uncle Sam is not your friend. I talk in the book about the scams that the U.S. government's running when it comes to Social Security, how it impacts widows. You can easily lose hundreds of thousands of dollars because of the way they're treating people on Social Security. or mistreating people. And then the whole student loan thing and how to repay, which of these options you should be taking to repay. So there's something in here for everybody, especially divorce. I want to talk about this for a second about the fact we have 4,000 people getting divorced every day. 10,000 people are retiring, 4,000 are divorcing. We have, for a lot of people, it's a 50% probability. So when you get married, you need to be thinking about getting divorced the same day. But most people are getting married. If you ask everybody's getting married, are you going to get divorced? They're sitting there taking their marriage vows, and before they say yes, you say, hold on a second, are you guys going to get divorced? What you think that's likely? None of them are going to say yes. They're all going to say no, we're not going to get divorced. But half of them are going to get divorced. Maybe it's 40% now, 45%, but it's a big number. Okay. And so if you move to Texas and you get divorced and you've been taking care of the kids, you gave up your career to take care of the kids, and so your spouse can earn more money, and you think this is going to go on forever. Well, Texas has very awful divorce laws. They're very sexist. So you need to think about what state are you going to be living in, because it's going to affect your divorce.
Wow.
And you got a 50% chance of getting divorced. So you have to take that very seriously. If you're treated, you have to protect yourself, and you have to, or write a prenuptial agreement that may actually keep you married, because it says, look to the other partner, if I make these sacrifices on your behalf, you need to take care of me. That's our agreement. Or whatever it is that's involved here, you have to think forward about this possibility. But I also talk about how to get divorced like an economist, in a way that doesn't lead to divorce war. We have so many people lawyering up, and then the kids are taking sides, and then the entire relationship between the kids and both parents is destroyed. That's just terrible. The ultimate thing we have to do here is decide what's the ratio of the living standard of the two parties, independent of what their resources are. Is this person working longer and harder? How old are they? All these things matter to the question of should they vote, and how long have they been married? But if they've been married, let's say 30 years, maybe having the same living standard or pretty close to it for both people is the right solution. Once you have that figured out, then there's an easy way to figure out the settlement. You just figure it out, write it down, take it to a single lawyer and say, write this up. And it's basically a cheap answer. You don't have to, and there's no war. And of course, emotions get in the middle of this, and people do want to burn up money in order to fight. So that's, but I think thinking about it rationally and how to do it. So there's a whole chapter on how to get divorced in the book.
Okay, I promise this is my last question. So you spoke about choosing which state you are going to live in, depending on, and that choice could signify a lot of money. Is there going to be an exodus of people from New York to Miami, for example? There is the tax burden in Miami is a lot less than, in fact, there is an exodus. A lot of millionaires are moving from New York to Miami. Is this what's going on?
Well, yeah, the Republicans passed this Tax Cut and Jobs Act in 2017, which got rid of these state and local tax deductions, which were helping the rich in California and New York, where they have very high property taxes. The Democrats are trying to restore them to these tax deductions so that we don't have New York City fall apart. We don't want all the rich people who live in New York City to leave, because there'll be no tax base, because the majority of people are very poor in New York, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx. These are poor areas. So we need to have the rich stay there. So the idea of just overnight, the Republicans going after the blue states, which have these higher property taxes, and at least the big blue states, that's nasty business. That wasn't for tax reasons, that was just to go after them. So I think that'll be undone, and we'll have fewer New Yorkers leave to Florida. I don't know how anybody could want to live in, well, I love New England and the big cities, and I'm not somebody could live in Florida easily. So I think, yeah, but we'll have to see. I mean, there is a lot of geographic mobility, and that's one of the things I say, look, when we moved, and I talk about housing, there's a whole chapter about that. It's called Get House Rich. My wife and I were living in a 960 square foot condo in the Back Bay in Boston. I love Boston. We had a beautiful old 1880 condo, 12-foot ceilings. I'm talking to you now from a house that's 301 years old in Providence. We moved to Providence, Rhode Island in the middle of COVID because we wanted to have a backyard and a little more space. So we got a house that's 1,600 square feet, but the price per square foot in this neighborhood, which is just as nice as the neighborhood we were in Boston, the price per square foot is a third as expensive as in Boston. So we got a bigger house for less money. And it's
that's magic. That's magic. That's the magic you're talking about.
Yeah, that's magic. I've got a friend who's working in Bali, and I talk about this in the book. He, you know, obviously the hours are a little crazy but he's working remotely, and he's got people coming in to help him cook and clean on a daily basis. And he's living the life of a prince at a very cheap cost from Bali. So right now, today, we can live anywhere and work anywhere if we just, you know, look around. So I'm trying to get people to look at their opportunity set. That's another big thing here about safely raising your living standard. If you think about being a mortician, how much more does that pay than being an audiologist? And in what city in the country does it pay the most? Well, that information is available from the Bureau of Labor Statistics on their website. I talk about that in the first chapter. So we can dramatically raise our living standard, even in the same field, just by switching cities, just by moving. We have to understand these opportunities. We have to understand what it means for our lifestyle, for our living standard, and also maybe our lifestyle. We may not like living in Jackson, Mississippi versus, you know, maybe Tampa, Florida, where it turns out that audiologists make about, I think, 30% more in Jackson, Mississippi than in Tampa. But maybe we like to go to Disney. Maybe we're stuck on Disney World. And that's the thing we want to do every weekend. For me, I would pay not to have to go there.
Okay, well, Larry, this is amazing. You are showing us how to really, from little adjustment in our life, we can, and practically no cost, we can just be way better off. So I wonder if you could tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners follow you?
Yeah, I just say one other thing. There's lots of people that are interested in investment. There's lots of investment advice, because what we say, think about how to invest, lots of secrets like time the market, like the stocks are not safe in the long run, like the rich should buy bonds, not stocks. Like retirees should be more and more in stocks as they get older and older. There's lots of surprises. So where can you get the book? Well, you can order it's coming out January 4th. You can pre-order today from your local bookstore, preferably, so we can keep those stores alive, or from Barnes & Noble's online or Amazon. And then it's coming out January 4th, and it will be audio. And the really cool thing is my son, Alex, who's about 31 now, is reading the audio version of the book. So father-son conspiracy here.
Amazing.
Collaboration.
And where can you be followed?
Oh, at kotlikoff.net. I'm at Twitter. At Kotlikoff is my Twitter handle, whatever. Facebook, LinkedIn. You can become a friend of mine, whatever.
All those links will be in the show notes. Larry, thank you so much for your time.
Anytime. My pleasure.